Hi, everyone. I want to thank you for joining us. I'm going to do a little recap of what this our session today is going to be about. So today we're talking about what's resiliency got to do with it, and that whole people know. We have a guest speaker here today, Carolyn Ellis, and we're going to be working with her in her framework that she's developed around resiliency called Thrive. And it's going to be a really interactive session today. So if you can't make it, which I know that's why we're recording this. So for those of you who can't make it, I hope that this is enjoyable for you to watch. And so we're just going to get off and go now for the rest of us. So great. So I do want to, before rolling off and introducing Carolyn, I do want to see if anyone has any questions about anything that we've been talking about or any of the assignments up until this point in the course. Everything's okay? All right. The next 3 sections have been released and are ready for you to view. So the next 2 is like mentoring your best team. The one after that is developing a growth mindset. And then the final one is how to maintain your authentic leadership style. Next week, we are going to have another guest. It is going to be, her name is Rena Reese, and she is the attorney, general attorney for Marriott International. And she's going to be talking with us about how do you get a team through crisis. She just spent this past year getting an international team through COVID and Black Lives Matter, and is still working on a lot of those issues. So it's going to be like a fireside chat type of thing, where a little bit like we did with Mike Frost. But so you can ask her absolutely any question and maybe start to think about that. And I'll send you all out an email with her bio and background as well. And I feel pretty fortunate for us to be able to have her come in and meet with us. Yeah, Tara.
I noticed that the Mike Frost Zoom recording link from last week is not posted yet, just as a note in the Moodle shell.
Okay, where they're supposed to be posted is underneath the Zoom link. It's not posted under there. Okay, I will talk with Justin about that, because he would be the tech fella. And I don't actually know how to
Rachel?
do that. Yeah.
I actually can see it. I'm a student though, so maybe that's what's causing it, but I can see session 2.
Okay, so let me make sure that Justin has it where everyone can see it. Thanks though for pointing that out. Maybe that's the difference. But Tara, aren't you a student as well, technically?
I am. It just says Zoom recording : and then it's blank.
Okay. Okay, good to know. Good to know. I appreciate that. Yeah, I will find out from Justin. Anything else that I need to check in on? Okay, cool. All right. So Carolyn is our guest presenter today, and she is a facilitator, coach, and author, and the principal of brilliancemastery.com. And I sent out her bio to you all, but I thought that maybe, Carolyn, you could share a little bit about yourself in person. Anything else that you'd want to add?
Yeah, oh, wow. Okay, well, I'm based in Toronto, Canada, and I'm super excited to have connected with Rachel. I just think she's an amazing person, and how wonderful that you guys all get to be in her course with her. And she told me about what you're doing here with authentic leadership. I thought, well, that's, that is fantastic, because I think particularly for, women in business, women wanting to start their own businesses, women in professions. I mean, I think there's a lot of really interesting twists and turns to our journey that we go through. And I certainly, in the course of my career, I've done a number of different things. And, certainly I've had my own business now for about almost 20 years. But I worked on Wall Street. I moved back to Canada. I worked in the Ontario government in the Ministry of Finance. I ended up being the director of development and alumni affairs for 2 major independent schools. So it was really into like fundraising and education policy. And my path, if you were to look at my full CV, and if Rachel sent it out, you might get a little taste of that. It's been a weird and winding road. And I do, sometimes I look back and I think, oh my goodness, like there's just so many different things. And yet I think that there are some common threads to it of really, wanting to find ways to be of service to people, and being willing to take on that challenge of growing myself as I sort of evolve into like the next stage of whatever my either professional choices are, or then when I started my business almost 20 years ago, it certainly has taken a lot of twists and turns. And I think that that's got a lot to do with what we're here to talk about today, which is about resilience. What do you do when you face challenges? And sometimes those challenges have been, for me, I'm happy to share, like I'm literally like an open book. So you can ask me anything in this class, but I think that, if I can impart with you how sometimes those things that feel so very deeply difficult in the moment, if we hang in there long enough and really, develop some frameworks for how do we access that resiliency within ourselves, they can just turn out to be incredible opportunities, and have been certainly for me. And I guess the latest exciting news that I have is I have a book. My next book is coming out this month. It's called Lead Conversations That Count: How Busy Managers Run Great Meetings. And I'm like, and even though this is not my first book, but it's like my second one, it's like, I know this mentally, I've done this, but it's still bringing up all of the inner dialogue of like, who do you think you are? So there's definitely a lot of, active resiliency levers I'm having to pull in myself, even up to this very day. So you never get through it. And I think that, that's part of like how we grow and evolve as human beings. So it was interesting actually to see that Carl Jung quote, which I did vote. I didn't know if I was allowed to, Rachel, but I
You are totally allowed to.
Oh, good. Okay, good. Yeah, I'm not asking for permission anymore. I'm just jumping in. So, but yeah, who looks outside dreams and who looks inside awakes? I thought, well, dang, how did that quote show up? Because that's really a lot of what we're going to talk about tonight. So that's a little bit about me.
So today what Carolyn and I are going to do is I have a series of questions to ask her, and kind of like I did with Mike Frost, and then you all can ask your own questions. She also has a series of questions that are going to help us discuss resiliency and, what it means to us, what it means to you, what it looks like to have resiliency in the moment or resiliency over time. And then we're going to be lucky enough to have Carolyn share with us a tool that she's developed and created to help women go through kind of as a guide to how to deal with resiliency. And then we'll end with where you can ask her anything. It's kind of like an ask me anything kind of session. So I'll just start off with the first question, Carolyn, which is, why is resiliency so important, especially these days?
My undergrad was in environmental studies. And so we always looked at issues from like, is it like the economic system? Is it the social system? Is it like the physical system? And so really looking at things as a system. And what I feel right now is we are so into this time of huge change, complexity, roadmaps that we made 6 months ago are probably already obsolete. And there's a quote, Beth Comstock, the rate of change will never be slower than it is today. And it's like, oh man, it's like, it already feels like really fast. So I think that resiliency and being able to navigate uncertainty without feeling that it's a reflection on you and your skills or your capabilities, but to really kind of turn the corner and access the resources and allow some of this turbulence that I think, we've been experiencing. Certainly, I mean, we were just talking about the forest fires in your neighborhood. We've got some terrible forest fires happening up here in the western part of Canada. Political, economic, social justice issues. There's so much that's really part of our conversation right now, and rightly so. How do you get through it? How do we make, make the world the way that we want to leave it for, our children, our grandchildren? So like, what's the legacy? So I think we're facing some really tough questions, and the answers aren't out there because nobody on the planet has ever been through a pandemic like this before. Like, we're having to recreate, invent, adapt, be resilient literally every single moment, whether it's in your workplace, in your place of profession, in your personal life, in your community. It's just such a critical skill set and perspective, I think, to have. Like, we have some pretty problems to solve, and we need to get our best thinking on to get on with solving them. And that requires how we work together, how we work with our inner selves, our whole selves, to really bring our best selves forth. So it's pretty timely.
I have to say that when you said that quote about things are going to just keep going fast and fast and fast, right? Like the rate of change is just going to be increasing. I felt this like pressure on my chest. I don't know how, if any of you others here felt that. And I thought to myself, one thing that I do have to say that I personally liked about this past year, which is not a popular thing to say, but I liked that things slowed down. And I felt that it was I had the ability then to get my feet underneath me and to begin to be resilient because things slowed down. I started to notice that quiet was really important for me because I had been running and going as an entrepreneur and as a leader and as a sister and a partner and a daughter, just like on this hamster wheel. And, Carolyn, I know that you have coached people for over 15 years on developing personal leadership and resiliency. And so I'm curious about your key insights that you have to help people become more resilient.
Yeah. I mean, I thought, like, of all that, experience and coaching conversations and my own personal twists and turns, like what do I know now that I wish I had known at the beginning? If I could have told my future self could have told my past self these things. And I think, one of the key lessons for me was that the answers aren't out there, they're really inside of you. So I know certainly, like in my 20s and 30s and, even getting into my 40s a bit, like that's just part of our arc of how we live our lives. When we're younger, we're invincible, we've got all these ideas, and we're really consuming a lot of, education and experiences and messages from those around us. And at some point, I think we come around the corner and have to say, yeah, I appreciate that's all of your opinions, but what's my path going to be? Yeah. What's true for me? So when we step out of living other people's dreams for us, or whether it's our partners, our parents, our children, like, so really finding that sense of self, and especially I think to bring that level of what's true for you in your leadership, in your work, in how you express yourself is really critical. So not looking outside, but to have the faith and the willingness and the perspective, say, wait a second, I think I've been through some stuff in my life. Can I own and claim my own wisdom, rather than just looking and saying, okay, what's the latest Beth Comstock quote, or what did Tony Robbins say about this, and be guided by other people's, it's great, but at some point I think we're really called to act on our own wisdom. Not information, but actual alchemized wisdom that's happened through blood, sweat, tears, challenge, stress, and you turn that corner. Does that make sense?
It does, and I see a lot of heads nodding in agreement that that's exactly it. And it's interesting because with all the information that we do have access to now, and all of the messages that are out there, it can feel really challenging to find and to believe that you do have this answer, right? That you do have the answers inside of you, and that there isn't someone that knows more. And it's quite a balance, right? Because sometimes it's great when, yeah, we do have these resources at our fingertips. But the end, I hear what you're saying is that the bottom of it is that you have to come back to what do you feel is right, and that you know what is going to happen. And it's so interesting that you say that, because in one of the team retreats that I lead with groups, I give them bracelets, and they hammer in a message to themselves of what they took away from the session and from the team, so that they would remember, you know, how to be with each other. What was the main thing their teammates said they need, and what's the main thing they want to give. And one supervisor said, you know, his said, listen better. And then another person wrote, follow myself. And it was just so wonderful.
Yeah.
And I love that inner strength to be able to say, no, I can follow myself. And it doesn't mean that I'm ignoring everybody around me, but that's a form of resiliency of like, I can go inside, I can breathe, I can see where the answers are.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's that discernment of like, what can I control and what's out of my control, and how do I manage those, and just like letting that stuff go. Because especially, I mean, look what all has been put on our plates collectively in the last year and a half as we've gone through this and are still going through it, right?
Yeah.
One question that I found to be really powerful that I use a lot is, you know, when you're in that place of, you know, the relationship failed, or somebody lost their job, or you've been given a diagnosis, or like those moments where you're just like, well, like what? Like, why me? Why is this happening? And a question, I mean, I think there's a point where you know, you have to feel those feelings in that, like in that initial moment of getting the bad news or having the challenge knock you over the head with something. But to then ask, you know, if you can sort of just like take that breath and just sort of say, well, rather than the why me, it's like, what if the universe is not out to punish me? What if it's out to polish me? What if I'm getting this, you know, this friction, this conflict, this difficult conversation I don't want to have? Oh, I hate them. Oh, but maybe this is my chance to recognize, you know what? I've done this before. I can do it again. And this time I can recognize where my self-doubts were taking me out before, and I can step up with more conviction. So really to ask that question and just know that sometimes these things, you know, they show up, I think, for an opportunity for us to grow ourselves. And I think there's, especially when you're looking at, I mean, how many of you are thinking or are in an entrepreneur or like your own business or thinking about it? Some, yes. There's such a strong correlation between how big can you show up and how big can your business show up. And really, I think, you know, that choice to lead and create a business of any kind, you know, is a very courageous choice, because it is a hardcore lab of personal development. And yes, there's business and there's clients and there's market value and there's all that good stuff. But boy, if you want to really accelerate your personal growth and come up against your stuff quickly, like I just shared, you know, I'm about to put out my, you know, my book, and I'm like, Send, will you please come to my book launch to people who I know are fans, and they're like, I'm so proud of you. I'm like, they're still like that little girl. So I was like, you are? Oh, thanks. It's like, oh, come on, you know. But I think, you know, part of that resilience is to not make that little instinct of like, please like me wrong. It's like, oh, honey, you're here again. Okay, well, it's fine, you know. This older, wiser Carolyn, who's seen some stuff, gone around the block a few times, we've got this now. So really, you know, forging that. And again, this goes back to your framework, Rachel, of like the whole self, you know, the whole self in terms of, you know, physical, mental, spiritual, all of that. And also like the whole selves that Carl Jung talks about, like all the little voices within us who are like saying, like, who do you think you are? It's like, oh, well, that's a good question. Now, if I, you know, you got a concern, yeah, I don't like, how will people like know about this? Okay, maybe I need to do a better job on marketing. Thanks for the feedback. You know, so turn those voices as a committee members rather than like the CEO of your life.
Yeah. And I love that you brought back, yeah, one thing when you were talking, I was gonna kind of bring up, I like that you're giving examples that are personal examples, because a lot of what this section of the course is about is that we are whole people and we bring with us the things that happen to us in our daily lives. You
Oh.
know, that we get ill, that we get divorces, that we lose relatives, that, you know, I mean, there's a myriad of things, or even just that we're juggling so many different roles.
Mhm.
And that is something that isn't always thought of when we think of work or when we think of leaders. It's like they are just this, you know, person that's supposed to be able to manage it all, and we don't know anything about who they are and what they are doing in their private life. But that is, I think, a real problem when we want real people to work with us and we want to act like a real person, and we need to take into account each and every one of us as who we are, that it's bigger than that. Otherwise, you know, we're just little robots. So
Oh, yeah.
I'm curious how, you know, and I think we can all talk about this, and maybe and you know, Carolyn, this is really, I know that you have kind of more things for us to do, but I am curious about how each of us feels, whether or not it's okay to show and share, and how much do we show and share about that we are whole people, and not that you burden other people with what's going on, but that you have a sense of balance. So with all the work that you've done over the years and the public-private sector, you know, that you've worked in, the corporate sector that you've worked in, you've gone back to school a few times, you've, you know, have grown children, like where has resiliency and the whole person perspective been important for you to maintain?
Well, I mean, there's so many things I want to answer on that, and I would love to hear from some of you all as well about your perspectives on this. But I think, you know, you asked Rachel about like how important is it, and I really think that especially as women are taking a greater, you know, prominence in corporate life, in community life, in leadership, I think is a little bit more. Just to me, I think that old paradigm of like top-down hierarchical, you know, command and control model is just so breaking apart. And it's not just, you know, women appreciating authenticity. I think men are also appreciating authenticity. When people say, I got to cut this meeting short, I have to go, like childcare, whatever, and just to like normalize and acknowledge and not invalidate the fact that we are whole people. And I think that's really important. And I mean, you know, in terms of like my experience over like the evolutions I've sort of alluded to, I mean, I started my first business, it was called thriveafterdivorce.com. Why? Because I went through one when my kids were quite young. I had 3 children. And my very first book that I wrote came out about 13 years ago. And why did I write that book? Because I wish I could have read it when I was going through the divorce. It's basically a book called, you know, 7 Pitfalls of Single Parenting, What to Avoid to Help Your Children Thrive After Divorce. I wrote it because I was like, I'm gonna I know I'm gonna make some mistakes here. And like, I would just love to like not let our relationship implosion negatively impact, to like mitigate that as much as possible. So that was one. I mean, so that's an example where, you know, something that I didn't expect to happen, it wasn't in my like little fairy tale that I wrote for my life, ended up eventually becoming like a business and launched me into being an entrepreneur and a coach and working with some amazing people and learning a bunch of things where, you know, I would talk to my family, they're like, what? We don't even understand what you're saying anymore. Because I was talking about, you know, SEO and websites, and they're like, huh? So like, it was like weird. And then, you know, another evolution, I then started working back more into groups and doing coaching actually for small businesses. And then I went through another, life's curveballs gets thrown at you. My daughter had a mental health crisis. And it was I just, like, for months, I mean, she's doing great. But she has a condition she has to really manage. And but as a mom, I was like, like everything just didn't matter anymore, other than that, the health of my child. So that just caused a whole other, like, what do I want to do? And so literally, I'll just be honest with you, I shifted into a field called graphic recording and facilitation, which is basically drawing conversation in real time, which is pretty cool. It was not anything on my mind. And my thought process in making the decision to start that looked like me lying on the couch with a box of Kleenex and a journal, and my little girl inside saying, you need a break. How about you go do that course play with the markers for 3 days in Victoria, in British Columbia? And I was like, okay, I'll do that. It will have nothing to do with my business, but I just need to take care of myself. I need to refill my cup. And I literally said it was not going to have anything to do with my business. And I went there and I was like, oh my God, I love this. And the fact that I can't draw, it doesn't mean anything, because I can listen and I see and understand how things connect. And it sparked a whole explosion in my business and a reframing of my business in a way that I'd never imagined. So I share those two personal stories with you just to show you, you just never know. And if we ask these questions about, wow, like, how am I doing and what's happening? And can I co-create with this situation using an open, resilient mindset, which we'll get to, who knows what will happen? Certainly nothing I ever shared with a guidance counselor in high school when we said, so, like, what are you interested in doing in your career? It's like, you should be so surprised. Like, and I still am. And that's why I love what I do. I get to be surprised all the time.
Oh, great. I do want to, I know we have some activities planned, but I'd love to open it up to any questions about what we've been talking about. I don't know if anyone has any.
And then we can, I'd love to. We're going to have lots of time for some conversation, but any questions? I know I've kind of rambled a little bit here, and I hope that's been all right, but
Sure.
I
yeah.
have a question.
Yeah.
In those moments when you were like sitting on the couch, unsure of who you were and where you were going, what direction you wanted to go, I think that resilient woman was still there. I mean, that was you.
Yeah.
And I'm going through a similar challenge, and I'm wondering, like, how did you ground yourself in your resilience and remind yourself that that's who you were when you were faced with like such a difficult challenge?
Oh, it's a great question, Tara. Thank you for asking it. In those, it depends on like how immediate like the pain of that experience is. I mean, I remember at that time I was like, okay, self-care. So I did like hot yoga bye Sandy. thanks for being here.
Bye, thank you.
I had to, it's like I did hot yoga every day for 30 days. I just tried to focus my mind on something that would be mild, like hopefully restorative to myself. I remember I started art journaling. I didn't know how to do it. I was like getting inks and throwing them and just letting some sort of creative muse happen. And I think it's that, you're absolutely right. That resilient woman was there, and, as well as that little scared child part of me. But sometimes you just need to, like, you kind of need to kind of marinate in it a little bit, because I think sometimes we try to short circuit our discomfort and to rush through it and like think through it. And so luckily I think I'd learned, through some prior experiences like the divorce, for example, like if I don't get that little piece of like, what's the pearl of this grit for me, if I'm the oyster, like I need, like, if I don't find the gift of it, I'm going to have to learn it in another way, and it'll be probably more painful. So, like that first time you sort of don't say the thing that you need to say to a good friend and set a boundary, then the next time it's like, oh my God, I need to handle this. So baby steps, and definitely, I think a lot of acknowledging myself, like, what am I grateful for? What's possible? Can I just surrender, and can I surrender a little bit more? Because, it's often in those moments of just surrender. And I mean, like my intellect was sometimes my biggest enemy, because it would be like wanting to rush and like solve and, do a spreadsheet and a cost benefit analysis about something. And then I'd say, no, it's not time yet. Just take a seat, wait till the path starts to emerge. So I don't know if that helps a little bit, but yeah.
It does. And I have another question that's on a different topic, but I was taking notes earlier. And I'm wondering, for anyone, what your advice is about leaving work at work and not bringing it into the home, yet we are talking about bringing our whole selves out into the world. And I'm like confused about
Sure.
how to marry those two and what your thoughts are.
Yeah. Carolyn, do you want to go first, and then I'll?
Sure. I mean, I think, especially if you're an entrepreneur, it can be, I think, learning boundaries so that you don't become all consumed by it, because it's very easy to do that. So, setting up some sort of practices, and it might be practices that you need to negotiate with the people that are living with you to say, okay, I'm not checking my phone, after 6 o'clock, I'm not doing the work. So to be able to stay present for those in your life, and stay present for interests that you have that might be not related to your business. It's a real balance. I don't know what you think about that, Rachel, in terms of.
Yeah, I think that it's true. We're saying like bring your whole self. So when we're talking about bringing our whole selves, there is that balance, right? And part of it is one world taking away from the other. Okay, and that's one balance. So if when you are home, is work taking away from home life, and when you are at work, is home life taking away from work? So trying to figure out, how do you create a nice balance so that you can be fully present no matter where you are? And so the concept of being a whole person means that, yes, at work, it's important to understand that people have other components of themselves, and they're not all just robots to be there at work. It also means that it's okay at times to appropriately share if there's something happening in your personal life without sharing too much, right? Because you still want to maintain that balance. But it is a big challenge, especially as Carolyn says, like if you're starting something new, it can be really, really hard. I also think that there are times like work can be really busy, and there might be times where in order for you to do the best, to be, you all chose values and went through that value sort. So if one of your values is to really have excellence in the workplace or to achieve, you might have to say, this is really important to me, so I am going to take some time at home because I need to move this forward. But then there has to be some balance in, okay, I met that, like as long as you're not doing it all the time forever and ever and ever, right?
Okay.
Does that, I'm not quite sure if that helps, but does that make any sense or speak to what you're asking about?
Definitely. Yeah.
It's a great question, and I think it's one that all of us are trying to figure out. I do believe that you get a little bit better at it as time goes on.
Yeah, and I think, just to, we talked at the beginning about how the world is changing and, like this newness. I think having that conversation and awareness and checking in is like, hey, this plan of, after 5 o'clock, it's like all family time or, whatever. But for the next 2 weeks, I don't think that's going to work, because so like to be able to like stay fluid and aware of like, what are the agreements that in coaching speak, we call it, designing the alliance. you may have to update those agreements, but just to have the honest conversations to say, you know what, here's what I need from you. And like, what can I, like, so to find that way to make it work and not just, you know, come back after the fact and have the conversation, well, why don't you understand me? Well, because we had an agreement and you're not honoring it, and it's been 6 months and now I'm upset. And I've got 6 months worth of resentment now we have to deal with as well. So, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So why don't I want to take a pause and welcome. We have 2 new folks that have joined, and then maybe Carolyn, we can move into the activity that you have around the Mentimeter. So hi, Leah, good to see you. Welcome. And then I'm not sure who iPhone Ichabod is. Is that could whoever that is? Could you introduce yourself? Yeah, because I'm not really sure who that is. No? Okay, well, I guess we'll just continue on. So Carolyn, do you want to move to the next?
So I will move on to the next thing. So I'm going to put something in the chat here, which is, I'm just going to do a little activity here. I want to sort of get a sense of your experience. And one way that we can do this is through this tool called Mentimeter. And so if you're able to open up menti.com, and go to that code number 5779-7168. And I'll just share my screen with you. I have a couple of questions that I've prepared. Let me just go over. I'm going to go to this one. So is everybody able to see that all right? So just, we're not going to spend a ton of time on this, but I just would love to hear a little bit more from you, and then we can, jump into some discussion. Like, so we've been talking about resiliency, and I'm just curious, like, what does the word resiliency mean to you? And using the Mentimeter, you can put in an entry. And so we're going to create a little word cloud here, and you are welcome to put in as many entries as you like. Maybe for this word cloud, keep it to 1 or 2 words per entry. But when you hear that term, what does that mean to you? And if anybody has any problems or anything accessing the Menti, just let me know, give me a shout. And we will start to see some answers popping up here. Tough, strong, flexibilities in the centers, bravery, persistent, showing up, courage, cool. What else? It's fun to see this little thing pop around. Strong, tough, strength, hardship, breath, bravery, flexible. Some themes there for sure about flexibility. Go a little deeper, see what else does resiliency mean to you? What if there's one more word? Somebody would say, what do you mean? Being resilient. What does that look like? Well, endurance. Yep, cool. All right. Thank you for that. So we're going to move on to our next question. And so just to take a pulse from the room, how resilient do you feel you are currently? And again, this is just like today, how are you feeling? Maybe you might want to situate it in maybe even a particular situation that you're facing right now. So you've got your scale here, never resilient, sometimes, often, 5 is all the time. So we have a good split here. So we have how many? 2, 4, 6, 7 people. So we'll just give everybody another chance. All right. Look at this, Rachel. High fives. Pretty resilient group here. Awesome. Good stuff. We'll move on to the next. So, I've shared a couple of situations. So just let's just start to imagine, like, what are some of those situations, whether they're present ones or maybe past ones, you're like, oh, I wish I had more resiliency. So, and you don't have to describe it in great detail, just describe it to the extent you feel comfortable doing so. But if I was in the Menti myself, I'd certainly add, early days of divorce, health challenge with my daughter, a close family member passed away, health situations and challenges, going through a breakup. Yeah. Homeschool. Bless you people who can homeschool, my goodness. Losing a loved one, supporting family members in need, living on my own, feeling that life is stable, facing endless challenges in the workplace where I am powerless. Awesome. So I guess we're getting a good sense here, like there's a whole range, personal, professional, relationship-oriented, health, uncertainty of work. Seeing a lot of whole person challenges here, aren't we? Yeah. Okay, let's move. Oh, we got one more coming up here. Not feeling anxious all the time. Failing to meet professional goals. Great. Yeah. Getting passed over for a job, not getting the interview. Great. Let's move on to the next question then. Thank you for that. So, having your understanding of the whole person and all those aspects, like what happens when you're feeling that stress or challenge if you're not being resilient? Let's just start to articulate what are some of the thoughts, feelings, behaviors that you start to experience when you're in that place of kind of contraction. Oh, isolation. Yeah, anybody else when you're going through a hard time but you feel like you're the only person on the planet that's going through it? Maybe nobody will understand. Shutting down emotionally, feeling depressed, unsure of myself, feeling overwhelmed. Absolutely. Angry. Yeah. Low energy, low motivation, weird sleep patterns, depression, lack of creativity. Feeling overwhelmed, sense of terror. Oh my gosh, it's some good stuff. And I mean, are you able to think clearly? I know when I'm going through, it's like I can barely think about what's for lunch, let alone how do I solve this problem? Anxiety. Great. Yeah, lots of stuff on the anxiety for sure. And so let's just go and flip it around now. So that's like what we experience when we're dealing with a lack of resilience. What's possible? What's available to you in terms of when you've had those moments where you feel resilient, you feel capable? Let's just describe and articulate what's happening with your mindset, your skills, or some of the qualities that you feel able to draw upon. I'm unstoppable. Woo! Confident and calm, optimism, creativity, feeling accomplished, able to see the light through the darkness. Beautiful. Proud, capable, motivated, nimble. Gosh, we need a lot more nimbleness, don't we, these days? Feeling positive of the outcome. Grounded. Yeah. Cool. And patient. Ooh, better than before. Well, that's nice. So I like that sense of better than before. Like you sort of get how you've been forged in some kind of way through the challenge. Feeling hopeful. Good stuff. All right. Well, thank you for jumping into the Mentimeter. I'm going to stop sharing here for a second. And yes. So any thoughts, any comments as you saw some of those? And hopefully that, part of that exercise will also give you some sense of like, oh, I'm not alone in how I feel about some of these things when I'm on the low end of the resilience scale and on the higher side. But it seems like this group is feeling pretty able to access their resiliency. Anything stand out for you from that? Anything you want to add?
One thing, Carolyn, I do want to mention, since we're talking about resiliency, someone brought to my attention, and I'm really glad that they did, that the video that I chose to talk about what resiliency is, at the end, it said, if you experience anxiety or depression, then you're not resilient. And I have to say that I don't agree with that. So I apologize for choosing that video. And I know that next round I'm going to pick a different one or actually create my own. there are different kinds of resiliency for different situations. The, stance that I take is people are resilient when I think like you do feel feelings. You feel pain, you feel anxiety, you feel overwhelmed, you feel the whole spectrum of emotions. And just because you feel them, if it is labeled by society anxiety or depression, it doesn't mean that you're not resilient. Resiliency is actually the ability to experience those feelings, have them, and move forward. You might be taking tiny steps moving forward. And some days you might not move forward at all. You might stay in bed and pull the covers over your head. And I love those days, actually, because it's saying like, I'm doing what I need to do in this moment. But the fact that you don't let something just stop you and you get stuck. And there might be times when we get stuck, but resiliency is about seeing what is here, feeling it, and then being able to rise to the occasion, no matter what that looks like for you, and move forward. So I do want to take responsibility for apparently not thinking through the video that I put up there, because it actually doesn't even represent my belief in the definition. So I wanted to take this time to say that.
Yeah, thanks. I think that's a great point. I think in our TV, our sitcoms, I mean, there's a lot of labeling going on, and the resiliency is always there. It's our ability to sort of access it, and I'm glad that you had that pointed out with the video. So good call. So are we ready to move on? Did you have something, Julie?
I do have a question kind of about, hello, and thank you so much, Carolyn, for being here. A question about the feeling of the feelings. And I kind of feel like a robot saying this, but often what will happen is I'm very aware of the feelings that I'm feeling, but often, there's no time, and I'll compartmentalize and, set it aside, kick the can down the road. And when then, I have a day off or some time to myself, it's like, I would like to enjoy, myself today. And this is if it's not an all encompassing feeling, if you're not just like really gripped by it. So more in the, like the medium 5 to 7 feelings. And so how do you go about, or what are some ideas that people have, and Carolyn or Rachel or anyone, just for like, what is the format to use when you you need to address some of these feelings? Is it writing? Is it speaking to others? What is that, so that that you're processing fully to be resilient, and not just thinking like, good, well, I got through that, so it's done now.
What a great question. I'll take a quick kick the can, and actually one of the Thrive principles speaks a bit to that. Feelings, I've heard it expressed like, feelings are just energy in motion. Emotion is energy in motion. And so finding some way to express them, I think, is a healthy way. And that might look very different for different people. So it could be, if you feel that maybe this is a pattern that is no longer serving you, of, I've got to schedule my time to feel my feelings a little bit later when I have more time. If you want to experiment a little bit with that, maybe it's, it could be in the moment, just sort of naming and saying, oh, there you are, freaked out. How are you doing today? And then you just go on with your day. Like, it could just be a naming of it in the moment that could work for you. Certainly during some of the tougher times, I do think that it's, if you can, like some sort of a journaling practice, I think that there's a lot of value, especially if we are very, feeling a battle between our brain and our hearts, is, like putting those things out on paper, whether it's even just speaking them to even yourself or putting them in a journal, because we can't think our way through our feelings. Sometimes we just have to feel them, and you might feel them by putting on your favorite dance tune and just moving your body to sort of give. And to me, I think what's been helpful, because I was very much My father was a university professor. I mean, we're a very heady kind of upbringing. And I mean, I literally didn't get into graphic recording facilitation because my brain was like, people can't draw and be taken seriously and make money and make a business out of that, surely. And like literally for 8 years, I thought that. So that's how long it took me to find my way to this thing that my heart was kind of nudging me towards for a long time. So finding some light way to like ease our over reliance, I think a lot of us have on our intellect, and just, and yeah, great suggestion here from Tara, slowing down. You know, even just stopping to take a few deep breaths, that might be all the processing that you need. You can just tell your brain, just sit down before you hurt yourself. We got this. I'm just taking a few deep breaths. Thanks.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah, and I can, Julie, I can put together a resource of like, these are the different techniques that you can do. So that we can, to address specifically what you're talking about, because I think it's a really important thing. And to really figure out like, how do I handle the emotions that come up, because we do not have control over, we really don't have control over emotions. We learn how to manage them, but emotions come and they come immediately. And so what I'm thinking that you're saying is like, if I shove them down, then they come out louder later. So how do I work with that? So I'll put together a little handout and send that out to everybody, because it's a great question, especially when I'm asking you all to feel like a whole person and bring it all. Tara, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback on what Julia was saying, because my resiliency wears thin. If I don't tap in to like whatever is happening, I will exhaust myself by like just executing and being the girl who shows up and gets it done, no questions asked, reliably. Like I can do that.
Right.
But then I'm gonna fall apart.
Yeah.
So it's so hard and not something I'm good at, but I'm trying hard.
Yeah.
You know, there's this great, I guess it would be a metaphor, but you know, we see ducks swimming along a lake and they just look so peaceful. They're just kind of going. But what we don't see is their little feet underneath going, trying to keep them afloat. And so it's just so many of us really experience what you're talking about, Tara and Julie. And we're in this society.
Is there too. So
yeah. We're in this culture where, you know, we all have to be so calm and peaceful. But I love this discussion. I think that what we're talking about is so is so important. So I'll put something together and then we can also revisit it again to see like how, you know, just some of these things help. Carolyn, do we want to move on to your 5 principles? Because it could potentially help. Yeah, it could potentially help some of this. So I'm going to drop in the chat box a PDF that Carolyn has created that outlines her Thrive principles, and hopefully you all will be able to download it. You should be able to, once it uploads, click on it, and then you can see her Thrive principles.
And I'm going to just share my screen just really briefly while you're uploading that, just to speak to the Thrive principles. So Thrive was a really important word for me when I was starting my first business and going through the experience of divorce. And we've been together for 20 years and high school sweethearts and all that stuff. And I think my kids were, when we finally got divorced, they were like 3, 6, and 9. So it was an intense kind of time. And I just knew that I didn't want to just go through this experience and scrape my way through and just survive. So this word thrive just kept coming up to me. I thought, well, what's in a word? And so I turned it into an acronym, which turned out to be a really helpful framework to articulate some things. And what I want to do is I just want to touch on this framework and how you could use it. And then we're going to have you have a chance to go into some small breakout discussions and just practice a little bit, like sharing a situation and looking at the Thrive principles and how you might be able to apply one of them. So the way I use the Thrive principles is really to imagine that you have, they're just some choice points that you can consider when you're facing a challenge. So T, trust. So having that strong belief that you can trust yourself, you can trust anything that life is throwing at you. So being able to lean into a deeper level of self-trust, would that be a choice in that moment of, you know, some challenge or a curveball that life has given you? Would that be a helpful choice to help you understand it, to process, to start to go around the corner a little bit? So really each of these principles are designed with that as a an opportunity for you to like lean into one of them as a way to start to unwrap the complexity and, you know, the anxiety and the sense of, you know, challenge that you might be feeling. Honesty. I think honesty is a really important element. And first and foremost, being able to tell the truth to yourself and others. So I know, especially, you know, it's very strong, capable women, you know, how are you doing? I'm fine. It's like, you know, to be able to say, you know, I'm feeling really overwhelmed today. Like, if we can't tell the truth to ourselves, especially, then we kind of are, you know, wrapping another whole layer of problem onto the originating challenge. So how can we be more honest with ourselves, and who are the people in our lives that we can also open up to? But the honesty really has to be like, we need to understand what we're dealing with before we can come to the other side of it. Responsibility. So we spoke a little bit about this principle actually before, talking about like, what do we control and what don't we control? And ultimately, you are responsible for your own thoughts, words, and actions. And that's about it. You know, it was a tough lesson for me as a mom of 3 kids. It's like, oh, they're not, you know, are my kids doing what it's like, you know what? I've got a role model for them. I need to offer, but ultimately I can only, you know, be in a place of being empowered around the things that I'm directly, you know, thinking, doing, and saying. Integrity. I think this is another thing that's really important, is like, how do we honor our word? So am I going to do what I say? And if I change my mind, will I own up and say, well, you know what? I said after 5 o'clock, no electronics, but I've got something that's come up, so I need to change that. And here it is. So it's not a surprise. So being able to, and I think integrity is also related there to trust, because when we break our words to ourselves, and we often, you know, the first person I know, I'll like be my word with other people, but to myself, I'll just like, oh, I'll do that exercise later. Oh, well, you know, one more piece of chocolate when I'm trying to like those kinds of little, you know, notches down on my integrity, like they undermine that sense of trust in myself. Vision. So this is to give yourself that opportunity. Sometimes we get overwhelmed because we haven't sort of stepped back and said, what is it that I'm like, what do I want my life to look and feel like? Whether it's professionally, personally, who you are as a person, and to take that time, and I think you've been doing some of that work already in this program, to say like, what are my values, and let yourself be, you know, guided by that big picture vision. So sometimes in that moment when you're in the stress of a situation, having that vision of yourself, you know, and I'll give an example here. It's kind of like one of the visions I had going through that divorce was I wanted to be sure that, you know, 20 years down the road when my kids got married, that my children wouldn't feel uncomfortable knowing that their mother and father would be at the same event. I really wanted that. And guess what? My daughter got married last summer. And the relationship that I have with her dad is such that it worked. I mean, I wasn't that comfortable sometimes. There was a few things, but she was like, she has her own relationship with me. She has her own relationship with her dad. You know, so that was something I was like, you know, this feels good. I mean, this is a seed that I planted, you know, 20 years earlier, and here we are. She's walking down the aisle. It's a pandemic wedding. We only had 14 people in the backyard, but it still happened. An expression, and we talked just a little bit about this with Julie's great question. Showing up as your authentic self and expressing your emotions in healthy ways. And again, what that looks like for you, you know, may be different than from another person, but to in a way that, you know, our feelings, our emotions are signals. They're signals to us that something needs our attention possibly. I remember, you know, long time before I realized I had made a lot of judgment about me ever feeling angry, and realizing that, oh, you know what, anger is just like another feeling. Sometimes it's a useful thing if I can tap into it in a constructive way, rather than assume it's going to be destructive and like trying to push my anger down. It would just, you know, I think like who was saying, yeah, Mallory was saying, yeah, then my husband suffers the consequences. There's definitely a lot of that going on. So finding ways to be able to express your emotions in healthy ways. So really seeing them as something that are signals to be honored, and they're not the totality of who you are. It's like watching weather patterns, like they come and they go, and you're like, oh, it's a this kind of day, you know? So those are the Thrive principles. And are there any questions about that before and we'll give you the instructions again for your short breakout discussions. Make sense? Good, okay. And so again, just imagine they're like a deck of cards, and you get to choose which one you want to, you know, to pull out and say, yeah, how could I use this more? So we're going to put you, what do you think, Rachel, like breakout groups of 3? Like 3 breakout groups and just like choose a place?
Yep, I have 3 great breakout rooms. There's 2 pairs and 1 trio.
Great.
And I have you in there for about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And you can come out sooner if you've run the course of the discussion, and that's how we'll know, but we'll at least give you that amount of time. Does that sound good, everyone?
And so what we're going to ask you to do is have each of you pick a situation that you might be facing right now, and just share that briefly with your breakout group, and just look at the Thrive principles together and say, gee, you know, I'm thinking that maybe I need to look at integrity a little bit more in the situation, because I haven't been really honoring what I said I was going to do. So I'm going to try that. So just to support each other with the application of these Thrive principles, and then we'll come back and have a little discussion about it.
And this is a great opportunity for you guys to practice your active listening skills that we touched on last week. And so remembering, like, sitting and listening, not necessarily jumping to solution, and doing reflections of what the person is saying so that they can come up with their own solution. So this is a great opportunity for you all to practice that. Sound good?
Great.
Hey, I'm gonna pop you into there, all your rooms. Here you go.
Great discussion. So that everybody's back. You must be officially starting. The recording's back in progress.
Yep, I just started the recording, so I don't have to figure out how to cut out the blank spots.
Cool. Well, welcome back, everyone, from your breakouts. And yeah, I'd love to just open it up for, maybe we can hear a comment from each of the breakout groups, just like what did you notice? What was helpful for you about the Thrive principles? Any questions that came up? What was your experience like? And whoever wants to start first can go ahead. Yay.
Mallory.
I'll go. I will say it was kind of ironic that Julie and I ended up in a room together, and Julie, I hope you're okay with me sharing. But we literally just talked, because I opened up and I was telling her that the E for emotion, and I'm going to start to cry, and Julie understands this. I don't show my emotions. I either keep them in, and then when they're ready to come out, they explode. Like an avalanche, like vomit, like tears. And it was comforting to know that Julie is similar in the same ways, and that sometimes as women, it's hard to properly express your emotions, especially in the workplace, without them thinking, oh, she's just getting emotional because she's a woman. She's crying because of this. And it's like, no, I want to punch you right now because you're, you know what I mean? Like, and so that's how we spent our time, was basically sharing how each of us are so similar with that, and how hard it is to express our emotions appropriately. when we are overwhelmed or frustrated, especially.
Yeah. No, it's such a great point that there's a whole bunch of to-dos and narratives and judgment about, women and their emotions in the workplace. And, if she's being assertive, oh, she's a bitch. And if she's being, emotional, oh, she's too soft. It's like, oh my gosh, like, how do you walk this line? And like, who's making up all these rules? It's not women. So yeah, it's very challenging. So yeah, I mean, and I think there, part of it is to, try to see what principle can you lean into that might support you in being able to, even finding those little ways to let out some steam or let out some communication that needs to happen in ways that feel like you can do it, and that will help to relieve that, the all or nothing that sometimes we do find ourselves in, right? Yeah, I'm glad that that's so interesting that you guys were similar dynamics happening there for you. Great, thank you for sharing that. How about another group? What did you discuss and notice? How did you find the application of the Thrive principles? Yeah, Leah?
I feel like Tara and I had a similar sort of like cry, like I'm gonna cry, experience, and it was really, and we shared responsibility and expression, like, and then as we talked about it, we realized that we're both moms, and then trying to navigate that. And, and that I think is true for a lot of women, is to try to navigate the work and the momness, and where do your emotions go when you're just doing that all day long? How do you have an opportunity to express that? And where is your responsibility? And when do you share that? That's my thing, is like, how do I find a way to share that responsibility with others? So yeah, it was a great breakout.
Great. Glad to hear it. Big smile from Tara there. Yeah, it's a lot, right? Especially, especially with like young business, growing career, family, it's so much. And so again, I think that's also part, like, and I just really want to honor the fact that, two of the two groups so far, you've like it's okay to have those tears. I think it's, to see those tears not as a sign of weakness, but as a sign of like your passion and your commitment to what's really important to you. And that sometimes you just want it so much, it comes out through your eyes because you want that. So to shift, like, can we take responsibility for shifting some of that narrative that keeps us in a place of judging our more vulnerable emotions and how we share that, Yeah. Thank you so much.
In our breakout group, Savannah and I both shared situations that had to do with work, and specifically having a conversation that we didn't necessarily want to have. But what was interesting is that the principles we chose were different, even though like our situations could be compared to each other. So I chose honesty and trust, and she chose, I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank, integrity. And while they're all pretty relatable, it was nice to see like different things that we felt we already had or needed.
That's great. Nice. Yeah, these principles are really, these principles are already all present in each of you. It's really a matter of like, oh, I need a little bit more of this today, or like a sound engineer, oh, we need a bit more bass on this song, or we need to, lighten up the violin section. It's like what, and just giving yourself, this is a simple framework to say, how am I doing right now? What might be useful? And I love that you had a similar situation, but you chose different solutions and different routes to get there. Very cool. Yeah. So I think, in the time we have left, Rachel, should we just open it up for just general questions? Anything else that people want to share? What are you taking out of this conversation here tonight?
Yeah, what we could do is if everyone just wants to, so that we do end on time. If you do have a question, why don't you could pop it into the chat, or you could also type in the chat right now what you're taking away from today's discussion. And then we can kind of all look at them at the same time. That's one thing that's really fun about and great about chat is it's a quick read for everybody. And then we can just do, because we have about 3 minutes left, I can just do a quick wrap up of what to expect for the next coming weeks. Follow myself, yes. Follow myself. All right, thank you, Tara. I am not alone. You are not alone. I love that. Go within. What if the universe isn't out to punish me? It's out to polish me. Yes. Yes, Carolyn, that was a wonderful statement. And I love that you shared that with us. Yeah, so in the chat box, autonomy and remaining proactive in good times and challenging times. Yes. Yes. In the chat, before I put in a map called the Authentic Leadership Map, I know that I'd shared that with you on the very first day of our session. This is going to be something that you can take out and print and begin to fill in. It's what is, for those of you who are honor students or grad students, it is kind of the final piece that you'll be turning in the very last week, so not till August 6th. But I thought that since we're at the halfway point, there's some of it that you can begin thinking about and start filling it in. I am on, email. You guys can contact me if you have any questions about it. I'm happy to have discussions. I've had some discussions with some of you separately. You can email me and then we'll either pop on the phone and I can chat with you about different things. And so we can just want to let you know that I'm here to support you in any way that I can. I am going to very quickly in the last minute show, just do a screen share to show you where the Zoom recording is. And this is definitely me being vulnerable because that is a scary picture of me that Justin paused it on, which is me, I feel like grabbing the world or something. I have no idea. But so you'll see, so this is like, say, you go into each class. So this one's the lead with empathy and respectful follow. You scroll down and he just, instead of putting a link to the Zoom recording, he just put right on there the YouTube with a picture. Okay, that's about as much bravery and vulnerability as I can stand. Whew. I'm gonna really not send him a box of chocolates, which I told him I already was for all the help he's giving me, but that's a scary shot. I'm just kidding. Anyway, yeah, any last questions or comments? Okay, well, Carolyn, I just want to thank you. I've had the pleasure of knowing Carolyn for this past year. We are both part of an entrepreneur group. And it's just been my pleasure to get to know Carolyn over this past year and to be in a broader group of entrepreneurs that really support each other. So I'm just thankful that she was able to come today and share with you.
Oh, well.
And I also want to thank each and every one of you for being so vulnerable, for sharing so much. I know that it's not easy. But this is that part of that journey is the more that we can share who we are, it actually makes things a bit easier because we start to see that we do have things in common with each other and we do have people that can support us. Mm-hmm. Now, choosing the right audience is always something that's important. Making sure that the audience that you choose to be vulnerable in front of is one that you can trust. So that's a little bit part of that authentic balance as well that we've been talking about.
And I
So
want to say before y'all wrap up, thank you so much, Rachel, for having me. And I want to thank you all so much for your questions and your interest and your sharing. And it's just been a real privilege and an honor to be able to have this conversation with you tonight. So thank you. And I'm excited to hear from Rachel what you all get up to at the end of this course. So best wishes to all of you. Thanks so much.
thanks,
Thank
Carolyn.
you.
Yeah. Wonderful. Right. Okay. So we'll see you all next week. And remember that Rena Reese, the General Counsel of Marriott International, will be joining us. And she's a really amazing person. I will have full disclosure. I happen to be lucky enough to be her cousin. So I have just been listening all year to everything that she's been going through. And I asked her to come to this and I couldn't believe she said yes. I mean, she is ridiculously busy, but I'm really grateful. I think we're all in for a very big treat. So have a good week.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
See y'all later.